I never expected a simple phone call to change everything. When I picked up the phone to ask my son Max about his wedding date, I thought I'd hear excitement, maybe even an invitation. Instead, my daughter-in-law Lena looked me straight in the eye and said with a chilling smile, "Oh, we already got married yesterday. We only invited special people." Those words hit me like a bucket of ice water. Special people. Me, the woman who had spent 3 years paying their rent, buying their furniture, and filling their fridge when they had nothing to eat, I was not special enough to be there. I stood in my own living room, holding the phone as if it weighed 1,000 pounds, watching Max avoid my gaze while Lena made herself comfortable on the sofa I had bought for them. The pale pink dress I had picked out for her wedding hung uselessly in my closet, along with the new shoes and the illusion that I would be part of the most important day of my only son's life. I had spent $200 on that dress, dreaming of how I would look in the wedding photos in which I would never appear. For weeks, I planned every detail. I set aside money for a $1,000 wedding gift and called my sister in Chicago to share the good news. I cleaned my house from top to bottom, hoping they might come celebrate with me after the ceremony. All of that collapsed in a second with those four poisoned words: only special people. Max finally lifted his gaze and said in a rehearsed voice, "Mom, it was an intimate thing, very small, just the two of us and the witnesses." But I knew it was a lie. I saw the photos on social media. Lena's parents proudly posing next to the bride and groom, her siblings toasting with champagne, Lena's white dress, which I had helped finance with the $800 I gave her last month for personal expenses. I saw everything I wasn't supposed to see. A week later, Lena called me with a completely different voice, no longer confident, but desperate and pleading. "Renat, the rent is overdue. The landlord is pressuring us. If we don't pay this week, he will kick us out. You forgot to make the transfer." Her voice trembled as if the world were ending. I was silent, remembering all the times I had rushed to the bank to make that transfer, canceled my own plans to ensure they had a roof over their heads, eaten beans and rice so I could give them money for their desires, and now, after excluding me from the most important moment of their lives, they had the audacity to call me as if nothing had happened. "Renat," I said calmly, surprising even myself, "didn't I warn you that I only help special people?" The silence on the other end was so deep I could hear my own heart beating. For the first time in years, it was not I who was trembling, but her. "Renat, I don't understand," she stammered. "We were always special to you. You're like a second mom to me." Lies. All lies, wrapped in that sweet voice she only used when she needed something, the same voice she used to ask for money for the wedding dress, the honeymoon, the rings, which I had helped finance without knowing I would never see the ceremony where they were exchanged. For years, I walked on eggshells, weighing every word, every gesture, every gift, hoping for a crumb of affection for my own son. I was the perfect mother, the obliging mother-in-law, the silent provider who never protested when treated like I was invisible. But that phrase, "only special people," awakened something dormant inside me, a cold, hard determination. I calculated in my head how much money I had spent on them in 3 years. Rent, food, gifts, emergencies, whims. Over $20,000 taken from my retirement, savings, and the money my late husband left me to live my last years in peace. And for what? To be treated like a stranger on my son's wedding day? That night I cried. Not tears of sadness, but of anger and frustration. Years of silently endured humiliation. I cried for the foolish mother I had been, for the woman who lost herself trying to be indispensable to those who considered her dispensable. The next morning, something inside me had changed. It was deeper than pain. It was a cold, hard resolve. I looked at myself in the mirror, the same tired eyes, the wrinkles telling stories of love given without return, but now there was a hardness I didn't recognize. A determination buried under years of compliance. I made coffee as I had every morning for 40 years. But this time, I didn't think about calling Max or checking my phone for an apology. For the first time in a long time, I was my own first concern. I sat at the table where I had planned surprises, counted bills, and cried silently. Now this table would witness something different. I took out my checkbook and bank statements and began to do the math. To see the extent. I was born into a family where love was often measured by sacrifice, and respect was expected without question. My husband, Robert, was a kind man who worked tirelessly to provide for us. After his passing, I found myself alone, raising our son Max with all the love and care I could muster. For 35 years, I dedicated myself to being the perfect mother, supportive, patient, and generous. I worked hard, managed the household, and made sure Max never lacked anything. I believed that love was shown through actions, through giving, and through sacrifice. Max grew up surrounded by this love, but as he became an adult, the dynamics began to shift. He married Lena, a woman from a family quite different from ours. Lena's parents were affluent, proud, and held themselves with a certain air of superiority. They valued appearances and status, and their world revolved around wealth and social standing. Lena, too, carried these values, often showing a coldness that I struggled to understand. For years, I tried to bridge the gap between our worlds. I welcomed Lena's family into our lives, hoping to build a relationship based on mutual respect. I bought furniture for Max and Lena's home, paid their rent when they struggled, and covered unexpected expenses without hesitation. I thought that by supporting them financially, I was securing my place in their lives, that my love and generosity would be reciprocated. But beneath the surface, tensions simmered. Lena's family looked down on my modest lifestyle. I lived simply, in the same house Robert and I had built together, surrounded by memories and modest comforts. I didn't flaunt wealth or status. My clothes were practical, my routines humble. In contrast, Lena's family flaunted their affluence. Designer clothes, luxury cars, lavish vacations. Their world was one of opulence, where money was power and respect was bought. This stark contrast created an invisible wall between us. I was the quiet provider, the background figure, while they were the center of attention, the special people. I often felt like an outsider in my own family, a guest in the life I had helped build. The more I gave, the more invisible I became. Max, caught between his wife and his mother, seemed to drift away. His visits became less frequent, his calls shorter. Lena's influence grew, and with it, the distance between us. I was no longer the mother he confided in. I was the bank account he relied on. The warmth of our relationship faded into cold transactions and unspoken resentments. Despite this, I held on to hope. I believed that family meant more than money, that love could overcome differences. I planned for Max and Lena's wedding with joy, imagining a day where we would all come together. I chose a pale pink dress, bought new shoes, and saved money for a generous gift. I dreamed of being part of their happiness, of finally being recognized as special. But the reality was harsher. The wedding was a secret, an intimate affair excluding me entirely. The photos on social media told a different story, Lena's family proudly celebrating, while I was left in the dark. The betrayal cut deep, but I kept silent, hoping for an explanation, a chance to mend what was broken. Behind closed doors, the financial strain grew. Lena's calls became desperate, pleading for help with overdue rent and bills. I was torn between anger and compassion. How could they exclude me from their joy, yet depend on me for survival? The contradiction was unbearable. I began to see the pattern. My love was conditional. My presence tolerated only as long as I provided. The special people were those who fit their image, not those who truly cared.
I realized I had been living a lie, confusing money with affection, sacrifice with love. This awakening was painful, but necessary. I started to reclaim my identity, to see myself not as a provider, but as a person deserving respect. I sought support from friends who had faced similar betrayals, finding strength in shared stories. I consulted a trusted lawyer, preparing to protect myself and my assets. The contrast between my quiet dignity and their entitlement became clearer. I was no longer willing to be invisible, no longer willing to finance a life that rejected me. The journey ahead would be difficult, but I was ready to fight for my freedom, my.
The days leading up to the wedding were filled with a mixture of hope and quiet anxiety. I spent hours preparing my home, cleaning every corner with meticulous care, imagining the moment when Max and Lena would come to celebrate with me. I wanted everything to be perfect. The scent of fresh flowers, the soft glow of candles, the table set with my best china. I rehearsed the smiles I would wear, the words I would say, hoping to bridge the growing distance between us. Yet beneath the surface, a gnawing unease settled in my chest. I wondered if my efforts would be enough, if my presence would truly be welcomed. The silence from Max and Lena was deafening. No invitations arrived, no calls to confirm plans. I told myself to be patient, to trust that love would prevail. On the morning of the wedding, I dressed carefully in the pale pink dress I had chosen months ago. The fabric felt heavy with unspoken emotions. I slipped on the new shoes, their unfamiliar tightness, a reminder of how much had changed. I looked in the mirror, searching for the woman who had once been the center of my son's world. The reflection stared back, tired eyes, a forced smile, a heart bracing for disappointment. As the hours passed, I paced the house, my mind replaying memories of Max's childhood, the laughter, the hugs, the promises of forever. I clung to those moments, hoping they would anchor me through the storm. The doorbell rang, and my heart leapt, only to sink when it was a delivery I hadn't ordered. The day slipped away, empty and cold. Then came the call. Lena's voice was calm, almost rehearsed. "We got married yesterday, and it was very small, just us and the witnesses." I asked if I could see them, if there would be a celebration. She hesitated, then said no. It was an intimate affair. I felt the weight of those words crush me. The dress, the shoes, the plans, all meaningless. I sat down, the phone slipping from my hand, tears blurring my vision. I scrolled through social media, and there they were. Lena's family, smiling and toasting, the white dress glowing in the sunlight. I was nowhere to be seen. Days later, I received a call from Lena, her voice trembling. She said, "The rent is overdue. We need your help." I was stunned. After the cold rejection, now this desperate plea? I hesitated, anger and compassion warring inside me. I agreed to help, but with a new resolve. I would no longer be invisible, no longer the silent provider. I began to prepare myself for the confrontation that was inevitable. I changed the locks on my house, installed security cameras, and sought legal advice. I was ready to stand my ground. The day they came to my door, I felt a strange calm. Max looked defeated, Lena frantic. An unfamiliar man, a lawyer, was with them. They spoke of concern for my mental health, of needing to protect me. I listened, my heart hardening. I refused to be treated like a child, like a burden. I gathered my documents, my bank statements, my evidence. I was not confused, not incapable. I was a woman reclaiming my life. The confrontation was tense,
filled with accusations and tears, but I stood firm. I was no longer the woman who gave without question. I was a mother, a person, deserving of respect. As they left, I felt a surge of freedom. The silence that followed was not loneliness, but peace. I had taken the first step toward a new life, one where The days following my decision to cut off financial support were filled with a tension so thick it seemed to suffocate the very air around me. What had once been a quiet, if strained, coexistence with Max and Lena erupted into a battlefield of silent accusations, veiled threats, and cold stares. The family gatherings I once looked forward to became minefields where every word, every glance carried the weight of unspoken resentments. At the heart of this storm was the growing divide between what I had given and what I had received in return. I had been the silent provider, the one who paid the rent, bought the groceries, and fixed the broken appliances. Yet, in their eyes, I was nothing more than a wallet with legs, a resource to be tapped until dry. The realization stung deeper than any insult. One afternoon, I arrived at a family dinner, hoping for a semblance of normalcy. The room was filled with laughter, but it was hollow, forced. Lena greeted me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes, and Max barely looked up from his plate. The air was thick with unspoken tension. As I sat down, I noticed the subtle ways they distanced themselves. Lena's family exchanged glances, their eyes flickering with judgment. The conversation was polite but clipped, each word carefully measured. I could feel the invisible barrier rising between us. "Mom, you should try to relax," Lena said softly, her tone laced with condescension. "We're just trying to move forward." Her words felt like a slap, a reminder that I was the obstacle in their path. Max nodded, avoiding my gaze. "It's for your own good, Mom. We want you to be happy." But his eyes betrayed a different story, one of frustration and impatience. Throughout the evening, I observed the subtle power plays. The way Lena's mother would interrupt me mid-sentence, dismissing my opinions as irrelevant. The way Max's sister would shoot me a look when I reached for a dish, as if I didn't belong at the table. The way their laughter would die down when I entered the room. I tried to hold my ground, to respond with grace, but inside a storm was brewing. The years of silent sacrifice, the countless times I had swallowed my pride, all came rushing back. I realized that this was no longer just about money. It was about respect, or the lack thereof. One evening, as I sat alone in my living room, the phone rang. It was Lena. Her voice was trembling, a stark contrast to the cold woman I had seen at the dinner table. "Renee, we need to talk," she pleaded. "Things are falling apart." I listened as she confessed the mounting pressures, the overdue rent, the mounting debts, the strained relationships. Yet even in her desperation, there was no apology, no acknowledgement of the pain they had caused me. I felt a mix of anger and sorrow. How had it come to this? How had the family I had nurtured turned into strangers who saw me as a burden? The conflict spilled over into the community. Neighbors whispered, taking sides. Some pitied me, others sided with Max and Lena, painting me as the unreasonable mother who refused to support her family. The social dynamics became a battleground, with alliances shifting like sand. At the heart of it all was the question of power. Who controlled the narrative? Who held the truth? I found myself questioning my own worth, my place in this fractured family. Yet, amidst the turmoil, a quiet strength began to grow within me. I realized that this conflict, painful as it was a catalyst for change. It forced me to confront uncomfortable truths and to reclaim my voice. I began documenting every interaction, every demand, every slight. I sought legal advice, preparing for the battles ahead. The emotional complexity of the situation weighed heavily on me, but I refused to be broken. The tension reached a boiling point when Max and Lena, accompanied by a lawyer, confronted me at my home. They questioned my mental state, accused me of irrational behavior, and sought to control my finances. The betrayal cut deeper than any wound. But I stood firm, armed with evidence and resolute. I was no longer the silent provider. I was a woman fighting for her dignity and freedom. As the confrontation unfolded, the layers of manipulation and deceit were laid bare. The family I had loved had become strangers, driven by greed and entitlement. Yet, even in the darkest moments, I found clarity. The conflict was not just a battle for money. It was a fight for respect, for recognition, for the right to live on my own terms. The emotional complexity of this chapter in my life was profound. It tested my resilience, challenged my beliefs, and ultimately strengthened my resolve. I knew the road ahead would be difficult, but I was ready to face the storm, to stand my ground, and to reclaim my life.
For years, I had played the role they expected of me, the silent, generous mother and mother-in-law, the one who gave without question, who endured without complaint. But beneath that quiet exterior, a storm had been brewing, fueled by years of betrayal and unspoken pain. The moment of truth arrived not with a shout, but with a quiet, resolute decision that would change everything. It began the morning after the confrontation with Max, Lena, and their lawyer. I sat alone at my kitchen table, the weight of their accusations heavy on my shoulders. They had tried to paint me as confused, incapable, even mentally unwell. But I knew the truth clearer than ever before. I was not the fragile old woman they claimed I was. I was a woman who had finally opened her eyes. I reached for my checkbook and bank statements, the very documents they had rifled through without permission. I began to tally the years of financial support I had given. Rent, groceries, gifts, emergencies. The numbers were staggering. Over $33,000 poured into a life that had never truly welcomed me. Each dollar was a testament to my love, but also a reminder of their disregard. That day, I made a choice. I would no longer be their ATM. I would no longer finance a relationship built on convenience and manipulation. I canceled the automatic transfers, closed accounts, and took steps to protect my assets. It was a small act of rebellion, but it felt like reclaiming my soul. When Max and Lena discovered what I had done, their reaction was swift and furious. They came to my house, accompanied by a lawyer, demanding explanations and threatening legal action. They accused me of irrational behavior, of endangering the family's stability, but I stood my ground, calm and unwavering. The truth was laid bare in that tense confrontation. They saw me not as a mother or a person, but as an obstacle to their comfortable life, a source of money to be exploited until I was no longer useful. Their words, their actions, revealed a cold calculation that shattered any illusions I had left. Yet in that moment of betrayal, I found strength. I realized that my worth was not tied to their approval or their demands. I was more than a provider. I was a woman deserving of respect and dignity. The fallout was immediate and painful. Family gatherings became battlegrounds. Conversations turned icy, and the distance between us grew. But I no longer feared their rejection. I had chosen myself. With the support of a trusted lawyer and new friends who understood my plight, I prepared to fight back, not just for my money, but for my freedom and peace of mind. I documented every interaction, every demand, every slight, building a case that would prove my competence and expose their greed. The emotional toll was heavy. I grappled with feelings of loneliness, grief, and anger. But I also discovered a wellspring of resilience and clarity. I was no longer the woman who gave blindly. I was a warrior reclaiming her life. The turning point came in the courtroom, where my mental capacity and dignity were put on trial. The opposition painted me as confused and manipulated, but the evidence told a different story. Medical evaluations confirmed my mental clarity.
Witnesses testified to my strength and independence, and I stood before the judge telling my story with honesty and courage. When the verdict came, it was more than a legal victory. It was a personal triumph. The court recognized my right to manage my own affairs and dismissed the baseless claims against me. I had won back not just my money, but my dignity and freedom. The aftermath was bittersweet. Max and Lena disappeared from my life, but I found new connections and a renewed sense of self. I began to live for me, traveling, painting, and embracing the peace I had long been denied. Looking back, I see that the greatest revelation was not just about my family's true nature, but about my own strength. I learned that love cannot be bought or forced, and that sometimes the hardest battles lead to the most profound freedom. This chapter of my life closed with a promise to never lose sight of my worth, to protect my peace, and to live authentically, no matter the cost.
The aftermath of confrontation and revelation left me standing at a crossroads of emotions: betrayal, sorrow, but also an unexpected strength that I hadn't fully recognized before. The wounds inflicted by those I loved ran deep, yet within that pain, I found the seeds of self-discovery and resilience. Betrayal is a peculiar kind of wound. It cuts not just the flesh, but the very fabric of trust and belonging. I had given my heart, my time, and my resources to Max and Lena, believing that family meant unconditional love. But their actions revealed a different truth, one where love was conditional, measured by what I could provide rather than who I was. That realization was shattering, yet it forced me to confront a painful but necessary truth. I had been invisible in my own family. This invisibility was not just about being overlooked, it was about being devalued. I was treated as a resource, a means to an end, rather than a person deserving of respect and affection. The emotional toll of this dehumanization was profound. I questioned my worth, my identity, and even my sanity at times. But through this darkness, I began to reclaim my sense of self. Strength, I learned, is not the absence of vulnerability, but the courage to face it. It is the quiet resolve to stand firm when the world tries to diminish you. My strength was born from years of endurance, from the countless moments I chose to love despite the pain. It was a strength that refused to be silenced or broken. Self-discovery became my refuge and my guide. I started to see myself not through the eyes of those who had hurt me, but through my own. I recognized the woman who had raised a son alone, who had worked tirelessly, who had loved fiercely. I embraced my imperfections and my scars as marks of survival and growth. Reflecting on respect and dignity, I realized these were not gifts to be begged for, but rights to be claimed. Respect begins with oneself, setting boundaries, demanding fairness, and refusing to accept less than one deserves. Dignity is the armor that protects the soul from the corrosive effects of betrayal and neglect. Authenticity emerged as a beacon in this journey. For too long, I had worn masks of the perfect mother, the silent provider, the compliant family member. But true freedom came when I allowed myself to be real, to express my pain, anger, and hopes without fear. Authenticity invited healing and connection, not just with others, but within myself. Family dynamics are complex tapestries woven with love, expectation, history, and sometimes pain. My experience revealed how easily these threads can unravel when respect and honesty are absent. Yet it also showed me the possibility of rewriting the narrative,
of creating new patterns based on truth and mutual care. Philosophically, I pondered the nature of love and obligation. Is love truly unconditional, or does it require boundaries to thrive? Can obligation become a cage rather than a bond? These questions guided my reflections and shaped my resolve to live differently. I found solace in the stories of others who had walked similar paths, women who had faced betrayal and emerged stronger. Their courage inspired me to continue, to fight not just for justice, but for peace. This deep emotional and psychological exploration was not a destination, but a journey, a continuous process of learning, forgiving, and growing. It taught me that pain, while inevitable, need not define us. Instead, it can be the catalyst for transformation. As I embraced this new understanding, I felt a profound shift within, a lightness, a clarity, a readiness to face whatever came next with grace.
After years of silent sacrifice and unspoken pain, the moment had finally come for me to reclaim my dignity. The weight of betrayal and neglect no longer held me captive. I realized that protecting myself was not selfish, it was necessary. Setting boundaries was the first step toward healing, a declaration that my worth could no longer be measured by what I gave, but by who I was. I began by changing the locks on my house, a symbolic and practical act of reclaiming my space. No longer would I allow uninvited intrusions or demands that drained me emotionally and financially. Installing security cameras was not just about protection, it was about asserting control over my life and my peace of mind. The changes rippled through my family relationships. Max and Lena, once so dependent on me, now faced a mother who would no longer be their safety net. Their visits became less frequent, their calls more guarded. The tension was palpable, but I stood firm, knowing that true respect could only grow from boundaries, not from blind giving. I also made the difficult decision to cut off financial support. It was not easy, years of habit and guilt tugged at me, but I understood that enabling their dependence only perpetuated the cycle of disrespect. I chose to invest in myself instead, my health, my passions, my future. This shift brought unexpected clarity. I found joy in small things I had long neglected: reading, painting, reconnecting with old friends. I began to see myself not as a provider, but as a person deserving of love and care. Empowerment blossomed from this self-recognition. Family dynamics evolved. Some bonds grew distant, others transformed. I learned to accept that not all bonds could be mended, and that was okay. My priority was no longer pleasing others, but honoring my own needs and values. The legal battles that followed were daunting, but I faced them with the same determination. With the support of trusted allies, I defended my rights and proved my competence. The courtroom became another arena where I reclaimed my voice and dignity. Through it all, I held on to hope. Hope that one day respect and love would be genuine, not transactional. Hope that my story would inspire others to stand up for themselves. Hope that peace was possible. Setting boundaries was not just about saying no, it was about saying yes to myself. Yes to freedom, to respect, to a life lived on my own terms. It was the most powerful gift. As I sit here reflecting on everything that has transpired, I realize that this journey has been about much more than money or family disputes. It has been a profound lesson in self-worth, boundaries, and the true meaning of love. For years, I believed that giving everything I had was the way to show love, that my sacrifices would earn me respect and affection. But I learned the hard way that love cannot be bought and respect cannot be demanded through generosity alone. The key lesson I want to share with you is this:
Your value is not measured by what you give, but by who you are. It's easy to lose ourselves in the roles we play: mother, provider, caretaker. But at the end of the day, we must remember to care for ourselves first. Setting boundaries is not selfish. It is essential for preserving your dignity and peace of mind. I also learned that true family is not just about blood or obligation. It's about respect, kindness, and mutual care. Sometimes the people we expect to love us unconditionally are the ones who hurt us the most. And that's a painful truth to face. But recognizing it is the first step toward healing and empowerment. If you are watching this and find yourself in a similar situation, feeling used, unappreciated, or taken for granted, I want you to know that you are not alone. It's okay to say no. It's okay to protect yourself. It's okay to choose your own happiness and well-being. I invite you to share your own stories and experiences in the comments below. Your voice matters, and your story could be the light someone else needs. Let's build a community where we support each other, learn from each other, and grow stronger together. If this story resonated with you, please like this video and subscribe to the channel for more real-life stories that inspire and empower. Your support helps me continue sharing these journeys and spreading awareness about the importance of self-respect and healthy boundaries. Remember, freedom and dignity are priceless gifts you owe to yourself. No one can take them away unless you allow it. Stand firm. Love yourself fiercely, and never settle for less than you deserve. Thank you for spending your time with me today. I'm grateful to have you here, and I look forward to sharing more stories with you. Until next time, take care of yourself, and remember, you are worthy of love, respect, and happiness.